Okay. We talked a little bit about Colombia and trade agreements, and what role do you think NAFTA and CAFTA and similar trade agreements play in developing the American empire?
Huge. Um, that's what they're all about. The World Trade Organization and all of these so-called free or liberalizing trade agreements are about helping U.S. corporations get a bigger foothold in developing countries. And every one of those trade agreements is stacked against the developing countries. You know, as an example, the cotton farmers of Mexico can grow cotton much more cheaply than cotton farmers in the United States. But because we subsidize the cotton farmers in the United States, they can actually sell their cotton cheaper in Mexico than the Mexicans can produce it. It's a very stacked equation because they're getting these huge subsidies from the U.S. government, which is your tax dollars and mine. And as a result of that, basically the cotton farmers of Mexico have had to go out of business. And a lot of them are coming to the United States as what we call illegal immigrants because their families are starving there. They can no longer survive. We've got this double whammy here. Our tax money is going to subsidize inefficient farms in the United States producing cotton at a very high price, selling it in Mexico at a very low price that undercuts the Mexican farmers. The Mexican farmers then are destitute, starving, and some of them come here, and then we complain that we've got this illegal immigration problem. If we would truly have free trade agreements, then the Mexican farmers would be selling their cotton to us as well as to each other, and probably our cotton farmers would go out of existence in this country and produce something else. Things would tend to balance out ultimately, but the cotton lobby in the United States is a very, very powerful one. The big agri-industry lobby is a very powerful one in the United States. So all of these, that's just one of many examples of how these quote-unquote free trade agreements are hurting people throughout Latin America and many other parts of the world and greatly benefiting our agribusinesses and other multinational corporations and hurting all of us as taxpayers. And not only that, but creating a destable world, a dangerous world, a world where there's suffering people. And these people know that they're suffering because we've created that situation. Our people may not understand it, but I guarantee you that the Mexicans do. Those cotton farmers in Mexico and many other people in Mexico do understand what's happening. And they're very unhappy about it.
Okay. So would you agree that free markets provide the solutions to a lot of these problems we face, such as immigration and many other issues that we're talking about in the political races this year?
True free markets, yes. But, we use that word, free markets, free trade, very, very loosely. But if we really had absolutely true free markets and free trade, I think that would be a huge benefit. As I said earlier, I speak Spanish. I live in South Florida. We've got a lot of Guatemalans and Mexicans and Hondurans here mowing our lawns and doing construction and all kinds of menial tasks that people born in the United States don't want to do. I talk to these people in Spanish, and I got to tell you, not one of them wants to be here. They want to be back in their homelands with their families, but they can't afford to be. They'd be starving there. So they work very, very hard here under terrible conditions, and they send most all of the money home to their families. And the reason they're here is because these agreements we've had, these policies, and the privatizations also of so many of their government sectors in those countries, selling those off to our corporations, has made those countries basically impossible for them to make a living in. That's why they're here. If we want to truly take care of the immigration problem, then what we want to do is help those countries build up their own economies, get rid of these terrible agreements we have with them, and let them use their own. They all have tremendous resources, those countries. Let them use their own resources to pull their own poor people up by their bootstraps, and that's exactly what these mean 9 presidents want to do. That's what they want to see happen. They tell us openly, we don't want your foreign aid. We simply want you not to have these laws that you'll enforce with your military if you have to, we're afraid, that so much benefit your corporations at the expense of our people and our resources.
And I think we talk about this on the show a lot too. How a lot of these problems are the result of corporations lobbying our government and our government working on behalf of corporations and vice versa. How can we restore a representative government that stands for true free markets?
That's the key point, Doug, and I'm very optimistic, actually. And Secret History, I think, is a very optimistic book, which really spells out a way that we can do that. If we understand that basically all of this is controlled by corporations, our government is very controlled by corporations. You know, every elected official in the United States has to have a big war chest of money, and most of these people comes from corporations or their major stockholders. And also the lobbyists, and today there's over 35,000 lobbyists, which is an incredible number when you think about it. They have a tremendous amount of power. They wield a great deal of money. So every politician, essentially in this country, is very, very dependent on the big corporations. And also, of course, our media, for the most part, the mainstream media is either owned outright by the corporations or financed by them through advertising budgets. So these corporations wield amazing power. And yet, we have power over the corporations. They're not military forces. And they only exist because we buy their goods and services. You know, if none of us ever bought a product made in a sweatshop again, there would be no more sweatshops. Or the sweatshops would become legitimate factories where laborers get real salaries and health care and retirement funds. If we buy no more inefficient cars, there will be no more inefficient cars. Those factories will close down. In fact, we're seeing that beginning to happen now. We have a tremendous amount of power. Corporations are not democratic internally. They're very hierarchical. But there's a democratic process in buying. So you and I and all your listeners determine which corporations are going to make it. Every time we go shopping or decide not to shop, we vote on which corporations are going to make it, which ones are going to have to change in order to make it, and which ones simply are not going to make it. And if every time we buy something or choose not to, we do this consciously, we buy only things that are going to help the world become sustainable and just and peaceful, and let these corporations, let Nike know why we're not buying their products because they're making them in sweatshops. Send them an email, and let the company you do buy from, let them know why you're buying from them. If we really do that, things will change. And we had a tremendous impact on getting corporations to clean up terribly polluted rivers in the United States, get rid of the ozone layer destroying aerosol cans, get rid of trans fats in foods, open their doors wider to women, African Americans, and other minorities. We've had a tremendous impact there. I think now we need to ratchet that up a notch. Every one of these corporations is driven by the goal of maximizing profits regardless of social and environmental costs. We need to convince these corporations that they can create profit. They can have profit, but only within the context of being socially and environmentally responsible, creating a sustainable, just, and peaceful world for every child on the planet. You know, I think we have to recognize, I have a 9-month-old grandson, I have to recognize that he cannot possibly inherit a safe, sustainable, just planet unless every child growing up in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America has that same expectation. We're a very, very small planet today. We're all totally interdependent, and we can't just try to create a better world for those of us growing up in the United States. We have to recognize that it has to be a better world for everybody.